Parliament is back from recess, and Yvette Cooper has just completely made the Home Secretary look like a fool. I mean, it's not hard, to be fair. But what I really want to focus on more is her answers. You see, the Home Secretary clearly has no idea what she's doing, and her answers appear to be rhetorical, like she's almost asking them from the opposition. It's really kind of surreal. She didn't give any of the answers to the questions that were asked of her, and instead just went on some mad rant about not having a plan and not doing anything. Yet, she's the one in the power that can do it. So we're still yet to find out how much extra it's going to cost the taxpayer. And when it comes down to it, I really think that she's got imposter syndrome, and she's completely out of her depth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your response, and thank the Home Secretary for her apology. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister flew to Dover today to congratulate himself and to tell us that his plan is working, even though the asylum backlog he promised to clear is at a record high. Decisions are down, caseworkers have dropped, hotel use is up, returns are still down. Only 1% of last year's small boat cases have been processed, and 7,500 people arrived on dangerous small boats in the last few months alone. The massive gap between the Tories' rhetoric and reality shows the Home Secretary still has no grip on the system, and this Conservative chaos is letting everyone down. The Prime Minister claims today he is stopping the boats, but the 7,600 people who've arrived in the last few months alone is 3 times higher than 2 years ago and 8 times higher than before the pandemic. All of us hope the limited reduction in the winter months compared to last year will be sustained when the weather improves. But criminal gangs have already made an estimated £30 million in the last few months alone from putting lives at risk and undermining our border security as a result of the Conservative failure to go after the gangs and maintain that border security. The Home Secretary boasted about an increase in enforcement, but compared to the COVID period, compared to before the pandemic, enforcement visits are down 22% and arrests are down 17%. This is not an achievement. The Home Secretary also says that she's cut the backlog, but the backlog is up at a record high 170,000. It has gone up, not down, since December. There's been an 18% drop in asylum decisions in the last quarter, and it's no good claiming that they are only clearing a so-called legacy backlog of cases from before June from last year. What about the growing backlog of 60,000 people and more who've arrived in the last 12 months? They're still in the asylum system, still in hotels, still in limbo. A backlog is a backlog, no matter how much they try to spin it away. The only legacy we are talking about is the legacy of Tory failure to tackle the problem. In fact, all the Home Secretary has managed to do is take a few decisions on cases that are more than a year old. That is not an achievement, that is her job. The Prime Minister and Home Secretary promised to end hotel use, but it has gone up to 47,000 people, higher than the 40,000 the Home Secretary told us about in December. The Prime Minister also said in December he'd already got locations for accommodating 10,000 more people, but now the Home Secretary says it's only 3,000 from the end of this year. And what she hasn't admitted is this isn't instead of hotels, it is additional because of their failure and the consequence of their new immigration bill, the bigger backlog bill, which is just going to make the backlog worse, because today's press release reveals the truth. It says that these accommodation changes could, quote, could reduce the need to source an additional 90 hotels. An additional 90 hotels. Why are they in such a mess? They need to be thinking about sourcing an additional 90 hotels. Why have they so totally lost any grip that the backlog and costs are getting worse and worse? On returns too, enforced returns are actually lower than pre-pandemic, and of the 24,000 people the government has now tried to return to safe countries they've travelled through, only 23 people have actually been returned, and even for Albania, where there is a return agreement, 12,000 people arrived on small boats last year, but less than 1% of those cases have been decided and barely a few hundred people have been returned. As for Rwanda, as my honourable friend has said, the government has actually sent more Home Secretaries than asylum seekers, and no one expects those numbers to be high. The taxpayer is already footing the bill for Conservative failure. Now we hear reports the new legislation will cost £6 billion.
Shocking.
Is that true?
Shocking.
Yes or no? The Home Office has already had to claim £2.4 billion extra from the Treasury Reserve. How much more will they claim this year? The Times reports illegal immigration will have to fall below 10,000 a year if the new legislation it's even possible to be implemented, because the Home Office says that ministers' plans are, they quote, based on demented assumptions. So can she tell us whether the demented assumptions are hers or the Prime Minister's? Time and again, the government's voted against Labour proposals to help stop dangerous crossings, voted against action to go after the criminal gangs, voted against the cross-border police unit, voted against fast-track decisions for safe countries, and voted against new return agreements and legal routes with Europe. People want to see a strong border security and properly controlled and managed asylum system, so our country does our bit alongside others to help those fleeing persecution and conflict. Under the Tories, we have neither, because the gangs have been allowed to go rip across the borders and the asylum system is in chaos. All we get is rhetoric. Rhetoric while the reality gets worse, demented assumptions, unworkable plans, empty spin. Instead of all the press conferences, we need a proper plan. The asylum system is broken. They broke it, and there is still no plan today to sort it out.
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Lady again for her extensive words. The theatrics gets even more colourful every time we meet, I have to say. And I say words because, as ever, that's all you get from the opposition. No serious alternatives, no credible plan, just empty rhetoric and endless noise. Mr. Speaker, last December, the Prime Minister and I set out a plan to stop the boats. Since then, we've been working flat out to deliver that programme. What has the Right Honourable Lady been up to? It's hard to say, Mr. Speaker. The question is, will Labour ever bring forward a plan of their own, a plan with details, a plan that delivers? The answer is, I'm sorry to say, they don't have a plan, and they actually don't care that they don't have a plan. It's this Conservative government and this Conservative Prime Minister that's dealing with the priorities of the British people. So what is Labour actually doing? They're very good. They're very good at carping from the sidelines. But when it comes down to it, Mr. Speaker, how do they actually act? They voted against every single measure that we've put forward to stop the boats. They would scrap our world-leading plan with Rwanda. And they continue to oppose our laws to detain and remove. Contrast that opposition to our common-sense proposals with their very urgent activism when it suits them. Because let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, over 100 of the MPs on the benches opposite, over half of the Parliamentary Labour Party, signed a letter campaigning for dangerous foreign criminals to be spared deportation. Those criminals included murderers and rapists who went on to commit further terrible crimes here in Britain. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, 14 of the current shadow cabinet campaigned to stop these vile criminals from being deported. Among them, the shadow Foreign Secretary, the shadow Attorney General, the shadow Health Secretary, even the Leader of the Opposition. I'll spare the rest. I'm still waiting for an apology, Mr. Speaker. I fear it will never come. Now, I note that the Right Honourable Lady didn't sign that letter. Perhaps that should be taken into account by the Leader of the Opposition before he decides to remove her from the front bench. And they continue to oppose our illegal migration bill, saying it won't work. Frankly, it's totally unsurprising. It's because, unlike the British people, the Labour Party wants more migration, not less. They want open borders, not control. Mr. Speaker, I'm a Democrat. The British people have spoken clearly and repeatedly. They welcome genuine refugees and do not want people to come here illegally. The opposition parties and the Right Honourable Lady are supremely indifferent to this problem. They are happy with a status quo that lines the pockets of the gangsters, is lethally dangerous, grossly unfair on taxpayers, and an intolerable pressure on our local communities. On this side of the House, we are committed to stopping the boats. We have a plan to do so, and we are delivering that plan.
Suella Braverman's not very good at interviews, and one of my favourites is her trying to defend the ERG. And you can watch that video, it's on screen now. Don't forget to hit the like button or the join button for membership. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.